So I'm going to ask that everyone mute themselves tonight just during the presentation. I promise you at the end of the presentation, you can unmute away and I will give you your voice back and I will answer any and all questions that you have. But I just find it easier to present the material and then have questions at the end. I also, as I mentioned to some of the ladies before, I am a one-woman band tonight, so I may not see the chat and may not see your questions during my presentation, but I promise you that after the presentation, I will go back to the chat and answer questions there. If you want to raise your hand, I can answer questions that way, however you would like. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am the treasurer for Miriam Circle Sisterhood, which is uniquely in Orange County, which is uniquely unaffiliated with a synagogue. I also am a new member of Temple Sinai Sisterhood in Las Vegas. I have been, I am a past president of Temple Beth Shalom in Santa Ana and a past sister president. And I also have been vice president of membership, membership secretary. So I have had my hand in membership before. So I wanted to start out tonight by just telling you why I think this topic is important. Why we're discussing volunteer burnout tonight. So on this. So I think volunteer burnout is important because volunteers are our most precious resource. With the pandemic these last couple of years and with the ever-changing look of our world, unfortunately, more and many of our volunteers are getting frustrated, anxious, exhausted, and sometimes we're seeing this in our best volunteers, right? The ladies who have been our best volunteers in the past. And sometimes we're even seeing this frustration and anxiety and exhaustion in ourselves. So I think it's a really important topic to talk about now. Even though hopefully we're getting out of the pandemic, I still think people I talk to still seem to be experiencing volunteer burnout and its partner in crime, pandemic fatigue or COVID fatigue. So tonight, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to define volunteer burnout and pandemic fatigue for you. And then I'm going to discuss how these things, burnout and fatigue, are probably influencing your sisterhood, not only in terms of getting your work done, but also in terms of maintaining your membership. Also, I'm going to discuss the warning signs of volunteer burnout. And we're going to discuss ways to be both proactive, that is, prevent it, and reactive, combat it when it's already there. And finally, we're going to discuss the very important topic of dealing with volunteer burnout in yourself, the self-care of you. So that is where we're heading tonight. Now, I definitely want to hear your stories. I want to hear what's been going on with your sisters, with you, and I want you to be able to express your frustrations. But I am going to ask you that at the end, when I open it up to questions, that you please be careful not to discuss specific names, specific details of stories. Let's keep that for private conversations. I will stay a little bit afterwards if you want to talk to me then. I'm going to give you my contact information at the end. You can always contact me. But I really don't think we should talk about specifics. If you're talking about volunteer burnout or fatigue in a sister or yourself, let's save that for private conversations. Also, for tonight's discussion together, I really want to try and follow the theme of the Sisters of Delta Nu and keep it positive. And for those of you who don't know, because I don't sing very well, that's from the Legally Blonde musical. So that's a song from the Legally Blonde musical. So we're going to really try our best to take this rather heavy topic and keep it as positive and maybe even add some humor into it along the way. Something more serious to talk about is that I will not be discussing very serious cases of mental health tonight. My background is in developmental psychology. I was a professor of developmental psychology at Cal State San Bernardino. So I can tell you a lot about development over time, how people develop, but I'm not a clinical psychologist and I don't pretend to be one. So I've given you some resources here. I've also put them in the chat. I'm also going to put them back up at the end. If you think one of your sisters is having more than a case of the volunteer blues, if you think it's something more serious and in need of more help, and we'll define what that is at the end in more detail, it's okay for them or you, if you're experiencing it, to ask for help. And here are some resources for you. It's really a sign of resiliency and bravery to ask for help. And I really think it's important that you have the resources to be able to do that either for yourself or a sister. So we won't be discussing more serious issues of mental health tonight. And I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that to you. So let's start out, let's define volunteer burnout. So volunteer burnout is a state of chronic stress that may lead to exhaustion, cynicism, and detachment. It includes feeling taken for granted. It includes feeling ineffective. It can include feeling unappreciated. It can include feeling disheartened. And it's the idea that you just no longer are enjoying your work. And the word chronic is really important here. Volunteer burnout isn't just an occasional bad day. It's a pattern. It increases over time. And it's this feeling over time of, I just don't want to do this work anymore. So it's really more long-term and heavy than just an occasional bad day. And not all burnout stems directly from volunteer activities. General life stresses also can affect people's desire and ability to volunteer. Add the usual life stresses, family, health, work, to a pandemic, and yipes. The World Health Organization has actually defined pandemic fatigue, and they define it as feeling demotivated and exhausted with the demands of life during the COVID crisis. But this is a really important key fact. Pandemic fatigue is absolutely 100% natural and normal. Why? Why would pandemic fatigue be normal and natural? Because at the beginning of this thing, fear really kept us motivated. Our short-term survival skills really kicked in. But over time, fear has been replaced by frustration and anxiety and exhaustion, and for some people, complacency. Under prolonged periods of stress, it's especially extraordinary stress like the last 2 years have been, it's completely normal for anyone and everyone to feel burned out. So what does COVID fatigue look like? It'll sound familiar. It's a lot like volunteer burnout. Feeling cynical and emotionally exhausted, feeling ineffective, and actually being less effective on the job. You're running out of personal resources, so self-doubt starts to creep in, and over time, you just aren't able to pay as much attention to the tasks that you normally do. So it's not only feeling ineffective, but you actually can start being less effective with pandemic fatigue. Your anxiety over the future may increase. When things are unpredictable, people often feel like things are out of control, like they don't have control over their lives, and that can bring on more anxiety. So volunteering may or may not be the root cause of someone's burnout, but regardless of the cause, you and your sisters may be feeling frustrated, ineffective, anxious, and just over it. So why is this important to your sisterhood membership? As the membership lady, I feel like I need to say this is actually affecting and will affect or could have already affected your sisterhood's membership. So volunteer burnout actually has a direct effect on your organization's impact. If burned out volunteers continue to show up for volunteering, their overall productivity is likely to decrease. If they're burned out and they come and they volunteer, their burnout may just be getting worse. So their productivity is gonna get worse, and that's gonna actually affect your organization. So you may actually see increased burnout if they keep volunteering. Volunteers are also representatives of your organization, especially if they're in public-facing leadership positions. So if volunteers are worn out or unenthused about their work and they come and they volunteer, then the people that they're volunteering with are looking at them and listening to them, and they might be starting to have second thoughts about whether or not to support your sisterhood. Look at Zelda. She's unhappy and she looks like hell. I'm not volunteering with these women. So it could actually hurt if this is somebody who's representing your sisterhood and working with other women. Also, every sisterhood member is an advocate for your sisterhood. So the info that they share is going to travel in social circles. So what if that info consists of critiquing and speaking negatively and ultimately discouraging their friends from getting involved? It's really hard to recruit new members if word of mouth is negative. And it's harder to keep the ones you have happy too. And I'm sorry to use the word contagion during a pandemic, but this is the kind of contagious where somebody is talking negatively and it gets around, and then other people start talking negatively. So it really can filter through your sisterhood that way. If this burned out sisterhood volunteer resents the leaders of your sisterhood, they also might start fighting back against sisterhood policies your board creates, or create a toxic culture and lower the morale throughout the organization. So imagine being on Zoom and having someone say, why are we even doing this? Or this is stupid. Or when I tried this, you didn't want to do it, and now we're doing it. And you think those kinds of things aren't going to be said on Zoom, but if someone is burnt out and tired, it might come out. Volunteer burnout, even if it's just a few of your volunteers, can start to seep through your sisterhood. So it can affect your membership. It can affect your sisterhood. So what are the warning signs of volunteer burnout to look for? Yep. See if I can get it done. There we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is if you see a change in someone's personality. If a person regularly spoke about how much they loved volunteering and how excited they were about their sisterhood work, and now they're starting to complain and they're starting to act grumpy, they could just be really worn out with their role. Cynicism, anger, loss of enjoyment, increased irritability are all symptoms associated with burnout. You might also, though, want to watch out for any volunteers who once were extremely forthcoming about their emotions and their struggles. This is somebody who really was good about talking about how they were feeling, and now suddenly they've become closed off. I'm fine. Nope, everything's good. Nothing to see here. Again, it's a change in personality. It's not somebody who's, to be honest with you, always been kind of grumpy or complainy or always kind of hidden. These are people that usually you didn't see this in, and now you're starting to see a change in how they're behaving. This even could be a change on Zoom. If suddenly they always had their face up and they always were talking and you always could see them on Zoom, and now suddenly they don't have their video and audio on. And I'm not talking about an occasional, I'm just having a bad night, or I'm shy, somebody who always just doesn't want to really be seen on Zoom. I'm talking about folks who were showing themselves and now suddenly they're not. Burnout could be to blame. It could be the reason. Also, people who are reporting feeling overwhelmed. If a volunteer starts confiding in you or in your sisters that they're feeling overwhelmed by the work, especially if they found it manageable before, it might mean they have too much on their plate, or they're having trouble dealing with difficult emotions and situations that they're encountering. That's another warning sign of volunteer burnout. Also, I call this the unintentional Eeyore. This is somebody to keep an eye out for who just doesn't feel like their work has an impact. Many volunteers are motivated to get involved in sisterhood because they really want to make a difference in the world. If they're feeling ineffective, they could start to feel hopeless and cynical, increasingly pessimistic, and they could eventually even give up. And we don't want to see anyone go through that. This is somebody who's like, what does it matter anyway? Nothing I do makes a difference. And they're not doing this on purpose. They're doing this because they're feeling ineffective. They're feeling burnt out. They're exhausted. They're anxious. And that's why I call it the unintentional Eeyore. Also, you might see changes in the work itself. Viola volunteer was a superstar. Now suddenly you start to see changes in her reliability, her productivity. This could be volunteer burnout. This could be COVID fatigue. It could be both. When a person who used to faithfully show up and dedicate themselves to every assigned task and now isn't showing up at meetings, shows up late, or does her work carelessly or not at all, there's something going on. So I told you we were going to try and keep it positive. You're like, Stacy, wah, wah, Debbie Downer here. So let's get a little more positive here. Let's talk. And I'm actually going to talk about this for a little while here because I think it's the most important thing with volunteer burnout. And that is, let's talk about ways we can prevent it in the first place. I really think the best way to deal with volunteer burnout is to nip it in the bud before it happens. So we're really going to talk about that for a while. I promise you though, because I know what you're thinking it's already happening. I promise you we are going to talk about how to combat it, how to address it when it's already happening too. But I really first want to focus on what you can do as sisterhood leaders to help prevent volunteer burnout among your sisters and among yourselves. So I mentioned that the risk of burnout can increase in volunteers over time. So remember Susie Sunshine? She was new and excited, and now she's Sassy Sour Patch. Well, because volunteer burnout increases over time, it's really important to identify and address the symptoms in your sisters before they impact that individual and your sisterhood. How you can do that is you can provide your volunteers with a positive volunteer experience, both during and after their time working with you. And this is the most fabulous way to prevent volunteer burnout. So I want to talk about some specific ways you can prevent burnout and fatigue. And I want to point out that the best way to do this is to think to yourself, how am I going to get my sisters to continue to be part of the squad? How do we want our sisters to continue to be part of the squad? And the answer is AOC. Get it, squad, AOC. I was really proud of myself with that. So I had to mention that. I was just, because I came up with this and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what we want. We want them to want to be a part of our group. So first of all, let's talk about A. A stands for two different things, advance and ask. Many volunteers quit because of a poor fit with the organization, or the sisterhood, the organization they're with, isn't utilizing their skills the way they could. So there's a poor utilization of a sisterhood member's skills, or she doesn't feel like she fits with the organization. So that's why it's really important to start thinking about your volunteers and prevent burnout in advance when you're actually recruiting them. So how do you recruit Sisters for Tess? Do you send out a recruitment notice? What kind of notice do you send out to potential volunteers? Do newer sisters know your mission statement? Do they know how you brand yourself? WRJ has the tagline, Stronger Together. Does everybody in WRJ who's a new volunteer know that tagline? It's a wonderful tagline. It's an important tagline. Do your new potential volunteers know anything about you? What's your tone like when you recruit them? Do you appear enthusiastic? What's your message to them when you recruit them? Hi, Gladys. No one else wanted this, but we think you'd be perfect. Have you thought about in advance the type of volunteer you want to attract? Do you want someone charismatic who's easily part of a team? Do you want someone who's had a lot of volunteer experience, or are you okay with someone who hasn't had a lot of volunteer experience in a particular role? What goals do you want this volunteer to accomplish? And I think a lot of times in sisterhood, we focus on the what. We focus on what we need. We need a gift shop manager. Instead of focusing on the why. Why would a volunteer be interested in this position? Why would this position be interesting to somebody? So I think it's really important to turn that question around instead of this is what we need to why would somebody be interested in this? What does this position have to offer to them, and what do they have to offer to the position? The other thing is, do you have a job description? It's really important to have a job description, especially for board positions. Provide your new volunteer or potential volunteer with as much information about the position as possible. Your expectations, their responsibilities, their start and end dates, where the location will be, and be honest about what the job entails too. I once had someone tell me that a volunteer position was not going to be a lot of work, and it was. I no longer have that volunteer position. So you want your sisters' expectations to fit the reality of the role, so they'll want to stick around and stay with your sisterhood. People get burned out when they've been told one thing and then they find it's something else. That burns out people really fast. Okay, so imagine you're a brand new member of sisterhood. You hate math. You feel very shy in public. You have no retail experience. And what you really love to do is sit in your pajamas and do graphic design from your home. And someone says to you, we want you to run the gift shop. That actually happens. My humble advice is not to say, honey, do we have a position for you? And by the way, don't call people honey. How about asking, what do you enjoy doing? What kinds of volunteer experiences have you preferred? What gets you up in the morning? That's a really good question to ask. What keeps you up at night? That can be a really good question to ask too, because maybe what keeps them up at night is a social justice issue, and maybe you need somebody to work on something with your social justice or social action as a director for that, or as a chair for an event. So asking those kinds of questions, what gets you up in the morning? What keeps you up at night? What's your passion? What kinds of volunteer experiences have you preferred in the past? What skills do you like to share? That's much better than volunteering them. And those of you who've been to my membership talks before know I do not like when people volunteer people things. You don't want to tell somebody what their job's going to be. You want to ask them. And that's the ask part. The last thing I want to say about the A in AOC is to please make sure that you give people time after you've asked them or talked to them about a particular role in your sisterhood. Give them time to think about it. Give them a week or so before they have to accept or turn it down. And let them turn it down without fear of judgment either way. They're still going to be your sister. We want you no matter what. It's okay if you can't do this. Because again, the goal is to keep your sisters and to make sure they don't burn out. You don't want somebody taking on something that then they're really unhappy. You want your sisters to be happy. So that is the A in how you're going to keep your sisters as part of your squad and keep them from preventing them from getting burned out. How about the O in AOC? The O is onboarding. And again, you're probably going, Stacy, this is volunteer burnout. What does onboarding have to do with volunteer burnout? Well, again, if you don't want to have somebody burn out in the first place, if you've done a really good job of recruiting them and getting them onboarded at the beginning, you're less likely to have them burn out later. So Zelda agrees to run the gift shop. Okay, thanks, Zelda. Okay, I'm leaving you now. Bye. Good luck. Now Zelda feels all alone. She's not been trained at all. She has no idea what she's doing. Goodbye, burned out Zelda eventually. Every sisterhood needs an onboarding or a training process. This is a way to introduce your new volunteers to your board and to your fellow sisters. It's a way to help volunteers know what to expect. Someone on your board, and it does not have to be your president, needs to welcome new volunteers through some kind of orientation. And I was a Girl Scout leader for 18 years, and we did this with Girl Scouts. We had an actual volunteer orientation specialist, someone who was assigned to that job. She went over our mission statement, our goals, any terminology. So we weren't going, what are they talking about at the first meeting? Job description for us, any financial procedures, event procedures, publicity rule or communication rules, and answered any questions we might have. And this might be an amazing job for somebody like a past president of your sisterhood who knows the ropes and wants to help out, or a really charismatic member who loves helping other sisters. So having an orientation specialist, I think, might be a really nice thing to add to your sisterhood. Your goal is not to teach your sisterhoods, these new sisters, how they can help you. Your goal really is to make them feel like they're part of your community. It's to give them the tools they need to represent your sisterhood and support your mission statement. And it's to inspire them to want to continue to do so. And one really nice thing you can do is you can create an onboarding toolkit. In this toolkit, you can give it out as a binder, or you can give it out as a PDF, or have it in a Google Doc, but it can include things like your organizational chart, and that can include who to contact, in terms of phone numbers and emails, because that happens a lot where people come on board and they're like, I don't know who to talk to about publicity. So it can have, who you're going to call? Bertha, the treasurer, for reimbursement. And here's Bertha's, email and phone number. You can include in this onboarding toolkit mission statement of your sisterhood, or if you have a vision or value statement or core objectives, if you have bylaws, all of that can go in this orientation toolkit. You can include any kind of tools and training for any software your sisterhood is using. I've had several sisterhoods tell me that they have not been doing anything for the last 2 years. And the reason behind that is because their sisters don't know how to use Zoom and don't want to use it. And I say, why not train them on Zoom from the get-go? We have an amazing VP of Marketing and Communication, Shoshana Lewin-Fisher, and she has developed Zoom trainings along with Lori Glaske and Julia Weinstein. We have just the most incredible tech team in the Pacific District. Those Zoom trainings are on Yammer. Why not present them to your sisterhood? Why not also the first time your sisters come on Zoom, even just have it, okay, we're just gonna do a practice. We're not gonna have a real meeting. We're just gonna have a practice meeting where we're gonna try out different things. And it's okay to make mistakes. We're all gonna do this together. We're gonna learn together. I really think that Zoom or some kind of virtual meetings are gonna be in our future, even when we go back fully in person. I think we've had people show up at night that never showed up before. So I really think it's important for sisterhoods to learn how to use the technology. You can include that as part of your orientation training. You can include information on where to find trainings on that in your toolkit. You also can include forms and the process for getting reimbursed, for handing the treasurer checks if they're going to do an event and they're going to have to add up checks, like a check summary. You can include anything about dealing with the synagogue, who the clergy are, especially if they're new to the temple too. Important locations, details, how to work with the office staff and who to call in the office for different things. You can include how to publicize and the communication rules. Who do you call if you need to make a flyer? Do you have to make the flyer yourself? Who do you go to if you want to post something on Facebook or Twitter or email something out? What are the procedures there? All of that can be a part of your onboarding toolkit, but I really recommend that. Again, giving your sisters the tools they need from the get-go is going to mean less burnout later. And finally, the C. So hooray, you're onboarded. So long and good luck. Zelda never hears from you again the entire year. Goodbye, burned out Zelda. I know it sounds silly, but unfortunately, one of the things that a lot of sisterhoods do, I think, is they don't follow up with their volunteers after they've given them the job. They give them the job, they may even onboard them, they may even tell them what they expect from them, but then they don't follow up after that. And without clear communication, even your really good volunteers, your best volunteers, sometimes might not know what they should be doing, or they might not have insight into the impact of their efforts. So your volunteers really need access to what I call their manager. Could be the chair of their event, could be their VP, could be the president, doesn't have to be, could be the first vice president for the vice presidents, someone who's going to answer their questions and allay their concerns, and not someone who's going to wait for them to call you. You cannot wait for them to call you. Assign someone to check in on them regularly, maybe once a month, maybe every 6 weeks, but I would do it no later than 6 weeks. Make sure someone's checking in. And hopefully this person who's checking in is an active listener, someone who's reliable, positive, and not burned out themselves. Ask the volunteer, is the workload manageable? How are they doing? Do they feel like they've been given clear, specific instructions on what's expected? If they have a deadline, do they know the deadline? Is the deadline working for them? Have they been given the level of autonomy they need? We all know that some sisters need more hand-holding and others really like to work independently, and nobody likes to be micromanaged. So make sure they're feeling like they have the level of autonomy that they want. Value their voice, listen to them. And because burnout can occur when volunteers don't feel like they're making an impact, make sure you showcase their efforts. Make certain that your sisters know their work is appreciated. And whenever possible, try to do it publicly. Write up a monthly volunteer newsletter to distribute to your sisterhood. Include photos or other tangible evidence that shows your sisterhood reached its milestones, and emphasize that you could not have done it without that sister. We could not have done what we did this year without Zelda. And provide shout outs at meetings and events. Thank them. I just made some stress less kits, some little kits that had Play-Doh and tissues and a little puzzle piece for Miriam Circle. And I was really touched, because we then had a distressing event where we had a clinical psychologist come to talk to us about how to de-stress. And so many of my sisters said, Stacy, those were wonderful. We love them so much. It really meant a lot to me. I was going to do it anyway, but it made me go, I want to do this again. I want to help out again. It really means a lot when people shout out and tell you that you did something that had an impact on them. Now, I'm going to recognize that not everybody is keen on public recognition. Not everybody likes their name shouted out. And if you know that about somebody, then call them or personally write them a thank you note. Those are other ways to just show them that you appreciate them, that you value their contribution, and what they're doing is making an impact in your sisterhood. You also can recognize birthdays and special occasions, maybe in a once-a-month email. Shout out to all the sisters who have a January birthday. The only thing I want to warn about with this is that make sure if you're going to list names, you have everyone's birthday, because you don't want to leave anybody out. But it's another way just to let volunteers know you're thinking about them, that what they're doing is meaningful to you. Volunteers are much more likely to donate their time if they feel valued, respected, and appreciated. And some of you who've been to my presentations are going, Stacey, you say this every time. And you are correct, I do. Because I think it is the #1 way to help volunteers feel not burned out. It's the #1 way to keep your members in sisterhood. If you want to keep the lights on, if you want to have fundraisers, you can't do that unless your members first feel valued, respected, and appreciated. And I want to mention 2 very quickly additional ways to prevent volunteer burnout that don't have to do with AOC. The first is to keep things flexible. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not get bent out of shape. For many leaders in sisterhood, sisterhood is their life. It's everything to them. As a result, they hold their sisters to a very high standard of excellence. Here's the thing though. Not everyone is going to be as passionate or as engaged as these leaders. Every sisterhood volunteer is going to have a limit as to how much effort they can and will put in and how they wish to contribute to your sisterhood. And that's okay. Expecting or demanding everyone to contribute in exactly the same way creates this level of pressure that's both exhausting and unsustainable. Instead, provide flexible volunteer opportunities. Not every volunteer has to come to every sisterhood event. Sometimes they might just want to put in a couple of hours with your sisterhood, and that's okay. Give them small tasks. You can micro-volunteer, you just can't micromanage. So let them have successes with minimal time commitments and thank them for those minimal time commitments. Maybe somebody loves Twitter and maybe they just want to tweet as an advertisement for your sisterhood. That's okay. Online volunteer positions, by the way, like someone monitoring your social feeds, graphic designers, webmasters, marketing experts, those are really good jobs for younger volunteers in your sisterhood. And I know a lot of people always ask me about how can we get younger volunteers to volunteer. That's something that they're doing anyway. Maybe they can just go on and like things and share things that you're publicizing in social media. And they can do this remotely across multiple locations. So that's a really good way for them to have a flexible job to do that they might enjoy doing anyway, since they might be on social media anyway. So flexible hours, scheduling your own time, no expectations, just do what you can do. Each person volunteers as much as they're able, and they're thanked for the contribution they make. No stress, no pressure. And those that work their tushies off, because there are those that work their tushies off, they get the extra added kudos, because you don't want somebody who's working hours and hours, who's devoting their life to sisterhood, to look at the 10-minute volunteers and go, well, they got a shout out, what about me? So you give them the special extra kudos. You give them awards and public data girls and the woohoos, so that they know that that extra work that they're putting in is really appreciated and that they really are making an impact on your sister. And the other final thing I want to say about preventing volunteer burnout might get me fired as the Pacific District Vice President of Membership, and Cher is on this as our president of our district. Thank you, Cher, for joining us. So I hope she doesn't fire me, but here goes. So I do keep getting asked, how can we get younger women to join our sisterhoods? And I do think that's an important question. And I do think we should recruit, of course. And I do think we should keep trying to get younger women to join our sisterhood, of course. But we have been experiencing pandemic stress for 2 years now. So should recruiting be our focus during a pandemic? Maybe not. Finding and fostering new relationships takes a lot of time and energy. If you ask business owners, they will tell you that it's much less expensive for them to keep the clients that they have than to try and find new ones. It's less expensive in terms of time and funds. If you're already feeling fatigued and overwhelmed, it might benefit you and your sisters to lean into the established relationships that you have, because these relationships can give you a sense of connection and community without using up too much of your emotional and physical resources. Perhaps it's better to check in on the people that are already your members than to expect your volunteers to be calling new people. Think about what it takes to call a new person and get them excited about sisterhood. You have to be up and bubbly. Now, some sisterhoods are there. We're getting out of the pandemic. We're ready to recruit again. And I think that's awesome. If you're there, go back and recruit, because of course we want to grow. But there are some times in our lives where, yes, growth is important, but stability is even more important. And I think during a pandemic, I think it's okay for us to say, you know, right now I'm going to focus my attention on keeping my current members, making sure that the members that we already have are happy. And again, it doesn't mean I don't think recruitment's important. I just think that if we don't want to burn out, we have to be a little easier on ourselves. And it's easier to check in on the people that are already your members than it is to make calls to people that you don't know. It just is. Okay, so let's talk about burnout when it's already there, because unfortunately, burnout can happen even when we take preventive measures, especially during the pandemic. And when it does, sisterhoods need to remember to be sensitive, because what a person is going through is going to make them possibly feel ashamed. When people are going through burnout or COVID fatigue, it can really affect their feelings about themselves. They might feel really ineffective. They might feel like they're not doing a good job for sisterhood. And remember, we're talking sometimes about our best volunteers. A really caring, good volunteer might see burnout as a sign of weakness in themselves. They might think that they're not cut out for the sisterhood work. So it's important to remember what I said before, that we're all experiencing this crazy to some degree, and it's totally normal to be feeling wiped out, anxious, or frustrated. So that's something you can do, is to assure them that this burnout that they're feeling can happen to anyone. And it doesn't reflect a lack of worthiness on them as a volunteer. It's going on with everybody. It's in the title of my talk. You can do anything because you're amazing, but you can't do everything, especially when you're frustrated and burned out. So it's important to give your sisters, if you sense that those warning signs that we talked about in them, it's important to assure them that they're not alone and that so many people are feeling this and that they are worthy as a volunteer, because they may be feeling they're not. That's when they quit, right? When they think, I'm not good at this. I'm not going to be able to be effective. Also, please make sure that if you suspect burnout in one of your sisters, that you ask them privately about it. Have a private conversation with them if you suspect burnout. Ask them if they're okay. Are they experiencing any stress in their world? And how can you help? Please don't call them out on Zoom. I've actually seen this happen. Gladys, you look really tired. Are you okay? Gladys may not want to tell all 10 board members that she's got COVID fatigue. She may not enjoy group therapy. Some people like group therapy, some people don't. So I think it's important to err on the side of asking in private, seeing how they're doing in private. Also, if you suspect that you are seeing the warning signs in one of your sisters, I think it's really important to ask them if they want to switch it up. Maybe you notice that they've been doing the same job for a while. Why not offer them something else? Something to lighten their load. It doesn't have to be that they have to quit sisterhood. It could just be a break. Maybe they still want to help out, but there's something else they could do that might be easier for them right now. Maybe they just really can't come to meetings right now. So maybe there's something they can do from home where they don't have to come for meetings. They still probably want to make a difference to your sisterhood. Maybe they're just feeling ineffective and underappreciated or sad right now, and they just are frustrated. So give them something easier to do. Or Even let them switch how they're doing their current position. Maybe they still want to do what they're doing, but they want to do it differently. So be flexible with them. Hey, I'm going to need to miss meetings for a little bit, but I still want to do my job. Okay, I need to come late on Thursday nights. Okay, we're going to work with you. Make sure though, if you're working with them, if you have someone else take over their role for a little while, or you don't have them come to meetings, please make sure you still keep all your volunteers in the loop. If someone misses a meeting or part of a meeting, please still be sure to send them follow-up, right? Remember we talked about that communication. Make sure that they get the minutes of the meeting as soon as possible after the meeting, or that someone calls them. You can designate somebody. Again, it doesn't have to be the president doing this, but make sure, because part of, I think, burnout is the feeling that you want to be helping, but you're just not feeling it. So if you're out of the loop, you're going to feel even more distant. So make sure that even if they've changed up what they're doing, or they don't want to come to meetings as much, you're still sending them the information so that they know what's going on and they can stay in the loop. And the last thing I really want to talk about is building resiliency. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from hard circumstances. And resilience, even though it's considered a personality trait, can be built up intentionally. So researchers studying COVID fatigue have actually studied strategies for strengthening resilience. And the first thing is to believe in yourself. And you can actually help your sisters with this as well. You can help yourself and you can help your sisters. Remind them, just remind them of everything they've overcome successfully in the past, all the things they've done, especially if they're long-term volunteers and they're some of your best volunteers, all the things they've done in the past for you. Self-belief is a really important resiliency skill. Maybe you want to share special poems at meetings, quotes. I have a Post-it note on my laptop, little orange Post-it note. It's kind of falling apart, but it's been here a while. And it says, I'm doing my best and my best is enough. And I remind myself of that every time I open my laptop. Little things like that, giving them little reassurances like that can help them believe in themselves. You are doing your best and you have done a successful job in the past. You've got this. That helps build resiliency. That helps build this ability to bounce back when things are going rough, like during a pandemic. You can also help your sisters by helping them pay attention to the present moment. And I know right now this is really hard. I've been to so many meetings and I've done it myself too. I'm guilty of this too. We start talking about the past. Remember when we could all hug each other? I miss hugging. We also talk about the future. I wonder if we're ever going to get to hug each other or see each other in person again. Maybe we're never going to see each other in person again, right? And I know it sounds like Debbie Downer. We don't mean it to be Debbie Downer. We just are worried and anxious. So we need to help ourselves and our sisters come back to the present. Present, not the president, the present. Hard word to say. I'm so glad we're here together. It doesn't matter the how. I'm just really glad we're here together in this moment. We are stronger together, right? So we are here in this moment together, and that's what counts. So you can help them to develop what's called a mindfulness habit. And if you're interested in this, I know Lindy Henderson is a real expert on this, and I think she's done some talks on this before. But mindfulness is the idea that we're trying to pay attention to what we're doing in the present. We're trying to stay in the present, because when you stay in the present, it's much more calming than worrying about what you did in the past. You can't change the past, or going to the future, which hasn't happened yet. So what can you do about it? Staying in the present also can help you to be more grateful, right? You can be grateful for being together in the present. And that's going to help, I think, when someone's burned out. I don't have to think about all the things I have to do in the future or what I did in the past. I'm just going to concentrate on this minute right here, what I'm doing right now. And then this other thing some of you aren't going to like, I know. And I'm not usually a fan of this either, but it's true that getting up and moving and grooving really can help you to build resilience. It's been shown, of course, to build body resilience, but it also can help you build brain resilience. Believe it or not, exercise builds brain resilience too. And you can even exercise on Zoom. You could have a dance party. People can turn off their videos if they're shy. But you could have a dance party. You could do meditation or yoga together. It's really harder to feel frustrated and anxious when you're shaking your booty to rock and roll. It's hard to do both at the same time. So that is another way that you can help your sisters build resilience if they're already feeling burnt out. Help them bounce back. Now, I think one of the most important things to talk about is you. Talk about what happens when you're feeling burned out. Because there's a reason I think why airplanes say, put the mask on yourself first. It's incredibly difficult to help other people when you're experiencing burnout yourself. So self-care is really important, especially right now, especially these last couple of years, but still it's important. And cutting yourself some slack is also really vital right now. You're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. That's from, by the way, if you like The Good Place TV show, it's one of my favorite sayings, nobody's perfect. And it's true. You can do anything because you're amazing, but you can't do everything. So it's okay to take care of you. You could write in a journal. You could meditate. There's something called the 5-3-1 meditation that my daughter Emily just told me about, where it's the 5 minutes free of a YouTube video. It's on, if you go on YouTube, you can look for 5-3-1, and it's actually 5 minutes of silence. And then you take 3 good things that happened to you that day and you list them out. And then you list 1 act of kindness. That kindness can be something you did for someone or something someone did for you. Like if you bought somebody behind you a Starbucks in the drive-through line. So that is something you can do that helps you to feel more centered and helps you to feel calmer and not as frustrated and not as burnt out. I mentioned before, you can show gratitude. It's really hard to show gratitude for other people and be excited and thankful and be frustrated at the same time. I've been doing it on Facebook this year. I tried an experiment, and every time I do it, I feel so good. And I didn't do it at first because I thought I'd feel good, but it's really had that effect on me. I did it because I wanted to show the people I love that I was grateful for them. And I'm hoping that I'm doing that, but I'm also feeling really good myself. And I can't feel burnt out and frustrated at the same time. It's impossible. You can take a long walk outdoors. You can not pick up the phone for a day and decide I'm not going to answer my messages today. I'm going to give today to myself. You can play Wordle or Candy Crush or anything you like that. You can sleep and eat well, because it's been found that routines are really necessary for maintaining your livelihood and your basic health. These have been found to have some of the biggest influences on people's stress level. So making sure you're continuing to sleep and eat well and keep your routines, exercise, as we talked about, talking to someone you love, pick up the phone and socialize. That's also been found to be really good for your mental health. Pick someone you trust and tell them, I'm feeling burnt out today. I bet you dollars to donuts, they might say, me too, because it's 100% natural and normal right now. Take breaks throughout your day. Help yourself by coming to terms with the things that cause exhaustion in you and allow yourself to regain that resiliency. You might have to reduce your own workload or go on a leave of absence even. Your sisters should be supporting you just like you support them. So you should be able to talk to someone in your sisterhood that you trust. It's much better for you to admit, I need a break right now, than for you to quit sisterhood or just to feel burnt out and bring that burnout. We talked about this, right? The contagion, the word of mouth, bringing that into your productivity and your morale of your sisterhood. It's much better to admit, I need some time, and you're going to bounce back better, I think, rather than lose you or your sisters entirely if you give yourself that time. And I mentioned at the very beginning that we weren't going to talk about the more serious issues, but I just want to point out that you are not alone. Pandemic fatigue, hard to say, but unfortunately there, is real, and so many people are dealing with it. So please don't hesitate to reach out for more help if you need it, or if you think one of your sisters might need it. Some of the things to look for is if you have constant low-grade anxiety that's affecting your well-being, your relationships, and your daily functioning. If you're experiencing symptoms of depression, if you've lost the motivation to protect your health and the health of others in your care, then I strongly suggest that you look for more help, that you look for, and it's a sign of resiliency and bravery, like I said at the beginning, to get help. It's a good thing when you need help to get help. So just remember that you and your sisters are the key to your sisterhood success. It's not the fundraisers, it's not the events, it's the people. Because when people are feeling burned out and fatigued, the whole organization is going to feel the effects. So let's not run from it. Let's not avoid it. Let's remember it's a natural state of being, especially during this crazy time. And let's just address it head on and help each other through it. Because I am convinced this pandemic is not going to last forever. And the skills we build to help ourselves get through burnout and fatigue can help us and our sisters when we face other challenges after the pandemic in the future. We are resilient and we are stronger together. So now I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes so you can write down my information. And if you want to join the membership group, you can contact Heather. And then I'm going to unshare my slides here. And I'm going to open it up to any and all questions you might have. You can unmute and we will chat. Let's see if I've got anything in the chat first, because we've been waiting. See if I can go down here a little bit. Oh, that was nice. Thank you, Dion. I didn't see it, so I wasn't doing anything. Oh, thank you, Cher. That's really sweet. All right. Yes, I love this, Roberta. So Roberta says, when my adult kids give me a hard time about things that happened when they were kids, I always tell them we did the best we could with the knowledge and resources we had at the time. Yep. That is absolutely true. And I think we have to really cutting ourselves slack and being kinder to ourselves and to our sisters, I think right now is the best thing that we can do. So does anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to talk about?
I just wanted to say I really liked everything you said.
Thank you, Evelyn.
And
Thank you so much.
it can be very helpful. We have to be listeners and we have to be good to ourselves.
We do. And I know that I thought some of you might be concerned because I talked a lot about preventing burnout. In fact, if you look at it, I spent the majority of the time talking about preventing it. And I didn't want to give you a title and a description of a workshop and then not do those things. But I really think the key to volunteer burnout is to catch it before it happens. And I really do think we can do some of these things that we will not see as much burnout. As I said, we're going to see burnout. It's a pandemic. We're going to see COVID fatigue, even if we do some of those things. And some of our women, we're going to see it. But I think at least we could help some of our women from the get-go if we prevent it before it even happens. So yes, the slides will be available. I will make sure that Shoshana gets both my slides and the presentation, which I think I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. That way if people want to ask, let me see. How do I stop recording here? Probably down here. Stop recording, right?